Hey everybody, it's Brittany. Welcome back to my channel. If you've been following my channel, you might have seen a big harvest that I did probably a week or so ago. If not, welcome to my channel and I'll put up the link right here. But in that video, I did harvest a bunch of green tomatoes because we're getting close to the time that we'll have a frost or major frost. We've already had a couple light frosts, but we're getting to the time where we'll have a major frost and it'll pretty much kill everything in my garden. I went ahead and just picked all the green tomatoes, and that's what I have here today. I have two groups. I have the large green tomatoes and I have the green cherry tomatoes. I was doing some research, checking out what I can do with these green tomatoes, and I found a couple interesting recipes. So I thought I'd try them out and maybe have you guys follow along with me. I definitely don't claim to be an expert, but I figure we're all learning here and maybe we can learn together. So I'll start off with the green cherry tomatoes. So I'll move my large green tomatoes just to the side here. So here are the standard things you're going to need to make pickles. I say standard because of course I haven't included any of the flavoring agents yet, such as different herbs. But according to my recipe, these are the basic things to make pickles. You have vinegar, you have distilled water. Apparently the vinegar and the distilled water make up equal parts of the liquid, along with kosher salt. You can also use pickling salt. Basically, you just need a salt that's uniodized, but kosher or pickling are good. You need, of course, the green cherry tomatoes, and you need some jars to put them in. Now, on one hand, I have a typical canning jar that I've already washed, so it should be sterilized. But on the other hand, I'm just reusing this jar that actually held bread and butter pickles. I've cleaned it out and I'm gonna reuse it because I'm thrifty like that. Who knows, these tomatoes might only take up this jar. But it's important to recognize that these are refrigerator pickles, meaning that I can use this type of jar simply because it's going in the refrigerator where the cold will be the preserving agent. I don't need to worry about processing it properly in a water bath canner or a pressure canner. So I went and collected my flavoring ingredients. In the recipe it gives a list of suggested flavoring ingredients, but I didn't have one and I just decided to omit another one simply because of personal taste. What's nice about this is out of the 4 bits of this, only one is not homegrown, and that's peppercorns. So I have some black peppercorns. And then the 3 other components are bay leaf, which I grow. If you want to know how that came about, I'll link a video up above. I have fresh garlic, and I have fresh dill seed, which is in the garden at the moment. So what I'm going to do with this is just throw it into the bottom of my jar. So I'm thinking that I should only need this jar based on the amount of cherry tomatoes I have. This one I'll just have on standby in case of overrun. So I'll just throw these in here. Remember, this is already sterilized, so that's fine. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and cut up my cherry tomatoes. I'm probably going to half or quarter it, probably half the smaller ones and then quarter the bigger ones. And then I'm going to put them in here, and then lastly I'm going to make my solution. It turned out that the amount of cherry tomatoes that I had only filled this up by about maybe 2/3 of the way. So I actually went out into my garden because I still haven't taken it out yet, and I did another search just to see if there were some green cherry tomatoes that I'd missed, and lo and behold there were. So I took them in, washed them, cut them up, and now I've filled up probably 4/5 of this jar, which is fine. So now I'm going to go on to making my brine. For my brine, I'm going to put a saucepan on low to medium heat. I'm going to put in my distilled water. I'm putting in 3/4 of a cup of distilled water. 3/4 of a cup of vinegar. So into that mix, I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of kosher salt, and the salt should be 2 tablespoons per cup of liquid. So I put 3/4 of a cup of each liquid, meaning that I have a cup and a half. And so a cup and a half times 2 tablespoons per cup is 3 tablespoons. I'm gonna just give that a stir and wait for that to come to a simmer. So my salt has dissolved in my liquid, and I actually ended up adding another half cup of vinegar, half cup of distilled water, and tablespoon of salt, because when I looked at the liquid, I just wasn't sure it would fill up this jar, and of course I want to be safe. So I've washed a funnel, put it into the mouth of my jar, and I'm going to carefully pour this burning hot liquid into my jar. And so you want to make sure that the liquid totally covers the tomatoes, but also that it doesn't come right up to the head of the jar. With canning, most people call that head space, which is you want a certain amount of space between the top of the jar and the liquid. I don't think it's that important when you're working with pickles, fridge pickles, although if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. But I don't think it's that important since it's more important for the water bath canning process. But that being said, I think, you know, it's just kind of cleaner to have a little bit of space rather than you open the jar and suddenly there's liquid right there. So I've left a little bit of room. Now the last thing I'm gonna do before I put my lid on is I'm gonna take a clean chopstick and I'm going to sort of stick it in there, move it around a bit, and that's just to get rid of air bubbles. You see, air bubbles can breed bacteria, which is what we're trying to prevent. And lo and behold, once I got rid of the air bubbles, the water level actually went down a little bit, and so I think I need to top it off a little bit just to fully cover all those tomato pieces. So I'll do the debubbling again. Try and make sure that all the tomatoes are below the liquid. Sometimes you have to poke and prod a little bit. So you can see some of those pesky tomatoes are getting up there, so I'm just gonna do a little bit more poking, and I think that's good. It looks like all the tomatoes are covered by the liquid. So I'm gonna take my jar and I'm gonna put that into my refrigerator. So according to my recipe, this does say that these pickles should last for around 3 months. The author doesn't recommend any more than that because of the risk of listeria, but then again, some people leave it for almost a year. So I guess it really depends on your comfort level. I'll probably, since this is my first experience with making homemade pickles, I'll probably just leave it for 3 months, and that's Those
it.
were green cherry tomato refrigerator pickles, and when you come back, I'll be making my second green tomato recipe, which will be green tomato chutney. Right here, I have everything I'm going to be using. I have my green tomatoes, which are the larger green tomatoes. I have some brown sugar with a little bit of powdered ginger and salt. I have a cup each of onion and apple. I have a cup of vinegar. I have a stick of cinnamon and this little tea steeper that has some cloves and star anise in it. This will just keep those two flavors from becoming overpowering. I have my jars, which I'm not totally sure how many I'm gonna need, but I have 4 ready, sterilized just in case. I have a funnel, which I'll use to fill the jars, and then I have a chopstick, which I'll use to debubble. Here I have all my chopped green tomatoes in the saucepan, so I'm just gonna turn on the heat to a low to mid heat. First, I'll pour in my onions and my apples. Mix it all around. Then I'll put my brown sugar and ginger, my cinnamon stick, and my vinegar. I stirred it so that the brown sugar was nicely dissolved with the vinegar. And now I'll just throw in my little spice packet here. And now what I'll do is I'll just put a cover on this and let it simmer for a little while. Ideally, everything that's in this pot should reduce by at least half. So I cooked this for about an hour and a half on low. For the first half of that time I had the cover on, and for the second half of that time I took the cover off to let it really evaporate and reduce, and as you can see it has reduced by quite a lot. So I'm just giving it a little stir, and you can see that it's kind of got a goopy texture, which if you've ever seen chutney in a jar, you know that that's the texture that I'm kind of looking for. But it is still a bit liquidy for my taste, so I'm going to take my immersion blender, and so you can see that it is a bit liquidy, so with chunks in it. So I'm going to take my immersion blender and just give it a little bit of a blend. It not to the point where it's like super pureed, but simply to the point where I still have some chunks, but the rest is sort of a uniform texture. Instead of it just being liquid with chunks in it, it'll be more similar to a chutney that you would find at the grocery store. I'm now going to take my sterilized jar and put my funnel in it. I'm not sure whether the funnel is going to work that well, but I'll see. And I'm going to take my ladle and I'm going to start to ladle this chutney in. I think definitely I realized at this point that it wasn't going to fit, so I was just going to try and put it into the jar with as little mess as possible. My final step with this green tomato chutney is to process it. I'm using water bath canning as a technique, but I do not have a water bath canner, nor do I want to have one since I don't have enough room in my kitchen. But a soup pot like this can do just as well. Basically, you just need something deep enough that you can have enough water that when you put the jars in and on a rack, then they'll be completely submerged in the water. And the reason why you want a rack in there is because you don't want the jars touching the bottom of the pan. So I just found kind of a small rack that I put down in there. I brought it to a boil, and now I'm going to take my tongs. Most people have special jar lifters. I don't, so I'm kicking it old school. So my jars are fully submerged on their rack, and I'm going to cover it and wait for it to come back to a boil. And once it does, I'm going to start the timer for 10 minutes. And you might be able to see over here, I just have a cloth that I've folded and I've laid out next to my canner. And that's because when I take out the jars after the 10 minutes are up, I want to put them on something like a cloth or a silicone mat so that they're not in contact with the cool countertop. What can happen then is the jar will be, which is still quite hot, can be sort of shocked, and it can sometimes crack as a result. 10 minutes have passed and it's time to take my jars out. Now ideally, if I've done this correctly, I should be able to hear some pops at some point, which will tell me that they've sealed. If you can't hear the pops, another way to do it is once it's cool to touch, you can unscrew this part and then try and lift the lid, and if it's giving you some resistance, then it has sealed. And so you can see this one hasn't sealed at all, which means I'll just have to put it in the fridge. And that one didn't seal either. So clearly I made some kind of mistake. I'm not sure, these might not have been the new lids. These might have been lids that have been used before, and I washed them and thought they would work, which generally I think is a no-no. I've seen different information about that. Some people think it's okay, some people say always use a new lid. So I guess I know now that next time it's probably best to use a brand new lid. So, oh well, lesson learned, and I'll just put both of these in the fridge and we'll try to eat them in the next couple months or so. So thanks for watching me go through these 2 recipes for using up green tomatoes. I had a ton in my garden, and it's nice to know that they didn't have to go to waste, that I was actually able to use them to do something. So it'll be interesting to, in a few days, to open this up and open my green cherry tomato pickles up and taste test them. And I might do a video for you guys here. I might do one just for my Facebook. I haven't decided yet, but I'll definitely video my taste test of it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested in seeing more. I upload videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Happy gardening!